Okay, so in this Creo tutorial we're going to have a look at how to create a simple bill of materials table. Now this can be useful if you're running the student version of Creo because some of the quick tables aren't included with that version, or rather they are included but PTC hasn't updated them to be compatible with an educational version of Creo. So yeah, essentially what we're going to create is something equivalent to this table that you can already see in this drawing. So you can see we've got a simple assembly here of a gearbox that has a few different parts in it, and what we've generated is a bill of materials table that has the what would be the balloon numbers once we put the balloon numbers in this drawing. So that would be the first column, the number, then the part name, so this would just be the file name that the part's been saved under, and then the quantity of each part that's present in this drawing. So the first thing that you're going to need to do is you're going to need to spec a table, and you're going to need to tell the system how many rows and how many columns you want within this table. So we're in the table tab at the top here, we'll click on table, and we're basically just going to draw or drag the number of rows and number of columns that we want. So we want 3 columns, number, part and quantity, and initially we only want 2 rows. So we want a title row on the top, and then we want an empty row underneath, into which we're going to put a little bit of intelligence into our table so that it parses the assembly and pulls out the bits of data that we want it to. So 3x2 table, then I get a preview of that table underneath my mouse pointer, and I just have to click on the sheet and it drops it on the actual drawing sheet there. So this 2-row table that we've just inserted, basically what we're going to do is we're going to type some static values into these top 3 cells, so the top row, and then we're going to get the system to look at the assembly that we've provided it with, so this assembly pictured in the views, and it's going to pull out some values related to that assembly and populate the next row down. And what we're going to do as well as that is tell the system that it's free to repeat this row as many times as it needs to below to capture all the values that are contained within this assembly. So let's put that static row in first. So I'm just double clicking on these cells just to enter some text into them. So this is the number that relates to the balloons that you will put in this assembly. So I'm just going to put the abbreviation of number there, and then I'm going to double click on this cell and maybe part or part name sometimes, or part number sometimes that would be referred to as, and then the last column just an abbreviation of quantity. So that's the static row taken care of. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to specify what's known as a repeat region, and that is this next row down. I'm basically telling the system that the quantities that it can enter into this row, it can duplicate this row as many times or repeat it as it needs to actually capture all the data that is stored within the assembly itself. So repeat region, I want to add a repeat region, and then all I'm going to do, so if you look down towards the left hand side of the screen, it's basically asking me to locate the corners of the region. So the first corner would be this first cell in the first row. So I click on there and I get this little circle basically saying that it's accepted that corner, and then I'm going to go on to the last cell in this row and click there as well. So double click on that cell. Then when I've got a little circle there as well, that basically everything between those cells is going to be captured. So this middle cell is also going to be captured in that range. So I can click on done. Then what I'm going to do is click on the switch symbols button at the top. What that allows me to do, if I zoom in a little bit here, is I get this light blue box, which is basically showing me the region that I've just specified. So that's allowing me to view the section of the drawing that I've just specified as that repeat region. So it's these three cells basically. So now that I've specified the repeat region that I want to enter this data into, I need to tell the system what data it is that I want to enter into these three cells, or these three columns. So I'm going to double click on the first cell, and I get this report symbol menu. And basically what this allows me to do is it allows me to pull this data that I'm looking for out of the assembly model. So the things that we want to specify are we want to repeat the index. Now the index is another name for the number that is associated with each component in this assembly, and that would be the same number that the BOM balloons would use as well. So RPT index is what we want to enter in the first one. Second one is going to be part name. So the way that you would access that is it's a quantity or a parameter that's associated with the assembly. So ASM for assembly. We click on that a single time, and then if we go into the MBR menu, and it will be the name option within there. So assembly MBR name is equivalent to the part names of each one of these components. And then the last column, so if we double click on the last column, we want to repeat value on this, all these cells that are going to be below this, and it's the quantity that we want to report. So we want report quantity. Now what it would be useful to do is see what values these requests are actually going to generate when they interrogate our assembly there. So the way that we can do that is click on the switch symbols button again, and you can see what it's done now is it's pulled all the relevant data using the references that we gave it. So we had RPT index in this first column, and then we had ASM MBR name in the second column here, and then in the quantities column it seems to be missing the quantities, but we're going to address that now. What I'm going to do first is I'm just going to change the width of this part name column, because as you can see these part names are longer than we expected them to be, and they're overrunning into the quantities column. So if you click on a cell in the column that you want to change, and then click on width and height, or height and width, and then let's try 50 and preview. So 50 is nearly wide enough. Let's try 55 maybe, preview. Yeah, 55 is perfect. So what we need to do now is there's an option in here which is not displaying these values, because some of these values are coincident with some of the numbers that it's put in this first column here. So what we need to do is open the repeat region menu by clicking up here, and then in attributes, and then just select the region that we want to change the attributes of, so this region here. And what we want to change this to is from duplicates to no duplicates. And then when we click on done, we should get the quantities column refreshing as we need it to. So you can see the issue there was that it had a filter switched on which basically looked at all the entries in all these cells, and it was noticing that the entry for 1 and 2 was already used in this column, and so it filtered it out when it was also used in this column. So we just switched that behavior off. And then if you need to position this, you can drag it around using the one of the corners of the placement box. And then obviously you can go on to put your balloons into this drawing and format it as you see fit. There are other videos on that, so if you want to run through those videos, this video was more meant just to show you an alternative way if you don't have access to the quick tables that are included in Creo.